Hello! A new version of OverRig, version 9.3, is out. It includes several changes and fixes, including some user-requested features. So, what's new? Let's take a look. There are some features that you'll find exceptionally helpful. Alright, let's take a look. And the first small change is remove select object from bake set button in the selector. This button bakes all sources and removes all OverRig modifications. Let me show you how it actually works. When you apply something, the created object goes into a set called OverRig nodes. There it is over here. And the source goes into the OverRig objects selection set. So when you press bake source and delete, everything is in the first set is baked and everything in the second set is deleted. That works fine, but some users actually asked, what if I want to keep a newly created system from being deleted? Maybe I need it for some other purposes or something like that. The simplest solution is, in this case, is if you don't have anything else, just let's say maybe you created a spine control, something else. Maybe let's say I create an AK. And if I don't want it deleted when I press the button, I just remove those sets, and that's it. And since the button, the function, can't actually find the objects in those sets, it can't delete anything. But if you already have, there are some cases, if you already have some modifications you want to keep, maybe you want to make these modifications undeletable or something like that. So for that, you can select the spine. So maybe I just don't want to delete the spine. I find it. I can find it in the OverRig nodes, and click the minus button to remove it from the set. Then I can find the spine system labeled main. In this case, it's over here in OverRig objects, and click minus to remove it from that set as well. And since different systems add different objects, I mean like rig systems, like specific locators for baking groups, you'll need to learn how each system works and adapt based on your system requirements. Another simple approach is first you can add the systems you need, then delete those two sets and continue working normally. The next feature added by user request is soft and stretch IK when you bake objects to inverse kinematics. And essentially it works in the same way as in the EasyRig plugin or script. If you used it before, you know what it is. Soft IK is kind of straightforward. After you bake it, it behaves like a normal IK, but has extra settings right over here. There is a length coefficient. If you set it to, let's say, 0.1, it will stretch slightly. So it will allow you to stretch the IK slightly. Yeah, you see? Maybe I can set it to 0.5. So essentially leg can extend to 1.5 times its normal length. Yeah, you see? Very cool feature for squash and stretch. There is also a full straight coefficient which actually works with the softness coefficient, which must be greater than 0. As an example, maybe let's set it to 0.1. It prevents, this setting prevents the IK from snapping when straightening. So instead, it's going to smoothly transition through the knee. Yeah, you see, it doesn't snap. It just softly transitions to the straight state of the leg or arm. I would say the regular value goes from a good range for softness is between 0.02 and 2.3. Higher values don't add much. If you set softness to 0.05, you can see how it softly bends the knee as it straightens. If you don't like that, you can increase the softness to, let's say, 0.1, and it will snap even less. If the value is above 1, the full straight coefficient kicks in. The full straight coefficient controls when full straightening happens relative to maximum stretch. If you set full straight coefficient to 0, the leg straightens as soon as it reaches its natural length and then begins to stretch. If you set it to 1, full straightening occurs at maximum stretch. And if you set it to 0.5, it straightens halfway through the stretch, taking softness into account, then continues stretching. In your specific cases, you can experiment with this feature to find the necessary balance between these properties. There are also two channels, JNT1 and JNT2, which record any leg stretch at the source. So let's say if you stretch your legs, this straightening is recorded over here, you see? You can unlock these channels and animate them manually if needed. And of course, knee control allows you to adjust the knee behavior within limits. You can see, it just gives you additional level of control, degree of control. It also works with 3 separate objects in space. It's letting you treat them as an IK chain while preserving their rotation. So let's say you have these 3 objects, like 3 separate objects that are just flying around, and maybe you want them kind of work as an IK system. So you bake them, and essentially it gives you an IK system, of course with keeping their rotations and stuff like that. And of course, if it is necessary for you, it may work like that. Another new feature for IK is the ability to bake it only for a portion of the timeline. This is specifically and super helpful for large files. Let's say if you have maybe a 5,000 frame mockup clip, mockup data, and you don't want to bake the entire timeline. So let's say if you have this animation, you can select 3 bones, define a certain range. So let me select 3 bones, okay, or 3 joints rather. Select the certain range, and then press the bake button. It's going to bake the IK only into this range. Right now you can see that the IK is baked only in that range. You can see before and after the range. So before the range it doesn't work, and after the range or in this range it works, but after the range it doesn't work anymore as well. You can add more than one IK system to the same leg on different segments. So one IK works in this range, for example. So you see it works over here, and it works in this range, so in a different range. Maybe for some reason you need it, for some purposes, depends on you. And it is controlled by the same attached channel as the standard knot. If you decide to select 4 bones, the old IK system for animal or horse legs works as before. And the same partial range baking applies to these 2 buttons. I mean individual baking and dependent system. Just as before, you can select necessary joints for your IK. Select some kind of range of your animation, and bake it, and it will work only on that segment. And it highly simplifies the process of working with longer timelines, large animation clips, so on and so forth. Next, Motion Trail has also received major updates. There is one new feature that is called Motion Trail. Now you see that points appear on each frame. Sometimes that's not very convenient. you can right click on that range. And here you can change the density for the dots like source. Then you'll see that points only appear where the source object has keyframes, which is useful when you want to see acceleration or deceleration of the object. Maybe you want to see like easings in some places or ease outs, something like that. Another requested feature, again connected to motion trail, is recalculating the motion trail relative to other objects. So you can right click on empty range and select trail space. By default, the trail itself, let me show you. But by default, the trail itself is in world space. But often, very often, you want to see the movement relative to the animated camera. And as a result, we want to check the movement of our object, not relative to the world, but relative to the camera. So for that, I can press the current camera. And next, we'll be able to see objects' movement in the camera space. And this helps identify camera shake, since you see the object moving relative to the camera rather than the world. Yeah, you can see how it moves. Yeah, the movement of the object relative to the camera. You will see over here, you can see the camera shake that you may need to change. You also want to, you can switch back to world space. Nice. And there is also an ability to track movement relative to any selected object. So let's say I'm going to create motion trail over here. So it's relative to world space. But we can make it the following. I'm going to select the object and then selected object. And now we can see how this leg moves relative to the root joint. Of course, you can do it relative to any other object, but be careful. If you recalculate relative to the object itself, the trail collapses to a point, of course, since the object's movement relative to itself is always 0. Okay, next new feature. To make working with mockup data or other long takes or long animation clips easier, if you hover over a panel with the OverRig activated, there's going to be a new menu. You see, it's going to let you set the current frame to the minimum or maximum of the scene or specific range. So I can select minimum, can select maximum, or can select a specific range depending on what I need for my animation. And say if you want to work in a certain range, you can use the older slider toggler over here. So relative to the select frame. The next useful feature is going to be placed over here. Here you can find the selection togglers. And right here, if we take a look, it essentially contains a few isolate features with different kind of purpose. So essentially, isolate selection is a regular isolate selection as it works in Maya. It was moved here just for convenience in order not to look for it on the panel above. Next, isolate selection with geometry is a very useful script I have on a hotkey. For example, with the hand animation, if I only want to work with the fingers, all other controls actually clutter the view. It's very difficult to work with them, very difficult to understand what I'm working with. I can only select only the finger controls and the hand locator if I need it. Because right now, if I want to select my only finger controls, I'm going to select other stuff like the table, geometry, everything else apart from actual finger controls. And of course, I'm going to spend some time on it, and it's going to be frustrating. And when you want to work efficiently, it's not really a good thing. I'm going to select the objects that I need. So in this case, let's say I need these finger controls. And maybe I can select the, since I use the locator for controlling the arm, I want to select the locator as well. And then I press Isolate Hierarchy with Geometry. And you can see that I have only my controls for fingers and the hand itself and the arm. And now I can freely animate the fingers if I want to, without like unnecessary stuff, unnecessary clutter, and so on and so forth. Only the controls that I need for my work. And let's say if I'm going to create new nodes, these new nodes are going to be automatically added to the selection, to the Isolate selection. Next, there is a new thing. What is the difference between actually the Isolate Hierarchy to Isolate Selected with Geometry? You see, if I select, for example, if I select Hierarchy with Geometry, it's gonna isolate everything that is inside this hierarchy of the selected object. But if I use Isolate Selected with Geometry, it's gonna select only the selected object. And both work for locators, for geometry, curves, but doesn't work for actually for joints. Because for joints, there's always going to be one hierarchy. It's going to work for one hierarchy. So this isolate functions apply only in the active viewport. So imagine if you have another camera in a separate window, and you maybe select that camera. The menu will only affect that window. All right. Under the kind of useful toggles tab, you'll find helpful switches like X-ray toggle. So essentially these are toggles that are very useful, but they're sometimes very difficult to navigate, to find, because my menu is rather cluttered. So it's X-ray toggle. Again, it works in the active viewport. So make sure the viewport is active before using it. Yeah, you can see right now. Of course, if it works like that, if you apply that to the hotkey. Next, translate axis toggle. It switches between local, global, and object axis for translation. Again, I have it mapped over my standard move command, and I suggest you to essentially assign a hotkey for that. You can find it in the script description. And similarly, the rotate toggle switches between local, global, and the gimbal rotations with direct access to rotation options. Because I personally consider this hard to access otherwise, following the regular Maya shortcuts, regular Maya approach, because they exist only in the side tool panel, which I usually close to save screen space. All right. Next, in order to save even more space, I moved color assignment from here into a separate color button. So how does it work? You can, let me show you. You can select an object, maybe some kind of locator. You want to change the color. You select this locator, click color, choose this color, and the object changes its color. I also added a shape button to change the object's shape to some kind of preset. Maybe to a circle, square, like one of the standard ones. Maybe cube. Naturally, it essentially works in the same way as it is done in the EasyRig. So if you use that script before, you are fully aware what it does. So imagine maybe I changed the scale of my locator, maybe I changed local scale Z. If I now change the shape to, let's say, circle or something like that, you see this circle is gonna be rotated relative to the local axis, locator as it was before. Unfortunately, the kind of small downside is that some shapes do that and some shapes actually don't. For example, cube. Maybe if I change the cube's local scale x, if I change it to cube, it's gonna try match this scale to the local scale x for the locator. Yeah, you see, it kind of makes it a bit longer. So essentially, if you want to get a different result for your changed shape, adjust the locator's local scale directly. Again, it might be useful for different purposes to make your locators of different shape. Next, you can also change the line thickness or line width, rather. There is, if you remember, there is a display line width over here, and there is a line width 1 and 2. And let's say if I set it to 1, you see how thin it is. But maybe if you want some objects to be thicker, maybe they have some kind of pre-assigned thickness, maybe 4. That's in this case, you can see that maybe this locator is going to be this thick, and this is going to make it so the line width will no longer work on these kind of thickened objects. If you want to reset that, you can select the object and then press the X button. Yeah, over here it's going to reset the thickness to default. Okay, that's quite clear. Okay, the last new feature is a button that counts selected objects. As you maybe have already seen, this is useful if you think you might have selected something extra while selecting your locators, your object, your systems. Sometimes it happens, it's perfectly fine. If you click the button, it prints the list in 2 formats. The first one is 1 per line, and all in one line. The column format is helpful for long lists of vertices or long paths, for example. So you can see, so you can actually take a look at this list and process it further. If you are writing scripts, maybe to optimize some workflows, maybe you're just writing macros for different purposes, just to possibly speed up your work or anything similar to that. If you right-click this button, you're going to get this like string array function. If I click it and if we check the result, you'll see that the list is going to be presented this way in order to be able to use it as a variable, essentially. Yeah, for example, it's going to be maybe string, some kind of variable, array equals that list. And this makes it rather convenient to write quick scripts for your work. Again, I just decided to make it so it's going to be easier to write macros and speed up your workflow if you need it. And depending on name length, you can use column format or single line string format. Personally, I prefer column format for long names because long strings can kind of go beyond the edge of the script editor. You have to scroll horizontally to find them, so it's not really like super convenient. And that's it. This is the full list of changes of the Base OverRig script 9.3.